There were giants on Earth in those days. That does not fit with the theory of evolution. It doesn't fit with modern science. Now go into that museum today, and you're not going to find that 14-foot skeleton that was there in 1940. I don't know what happened to it. I'm just telling you that in 1940 it was there. Today it's gone. It doesn't fit with the theory of evolution. And I first of all want to tell you that that is not science, and that is not academic. And that is propaganda. If it doesn't fit with your theory, what you do is you destroy it. You eliminate it. Get rid of it. And that's not honest. And then it's not intellectual. So when I hear stories like that, I say to myself, well, why would archaeology, why would science, why would people in museums want to deliberately destroy the evidence? I mean, if there were giants, then why don't we say, well, gosh, there were giants. That's the truth. How many of these giants were there? Well, now, it could be that the 14-foot giant was just an anomaly. You know, it happens once in a while. You look in the Guinness Book of Records, there was a guy that was just, I think it was 8'11", or 8'10.5" or something, just a shade under 9 feet tall. Now, the Bible talks about a guy named Goliath. You know, there's David and Goliath. There's a Bible story there. Well, Goliath was 9'6". And compared to the giants described in the Bible, Goliath was a midget. You know, 9 feet is pretty tall when you're comparing it to a 6-foot man, but 14 feet. And there was the story of a guy named King Og, and his bedstead was 14 feet. So the 14-foot skeleton that was in the Chicago Museum was an average run-of-the-mill 14-foot skeleton. There were people that were 15, 16 feet tall. And I suppose there were people that were 9, 10, 11, 12 feet tall. But they're all big. They're big guys. Now, are there any other skeletons beside that one in the Museum of Natural History in Chicago? And the answer is yes, by the hundreds. They've been discovered all over the world. And Dead Men Secrets identifies the locations of those finds. And I didn't know that before. So I had heard of the Great Pyramid. I had heard of the Nazca monuments out here in the desert where they got spiders and monkeys, you know, that are miles across, 6, 8 miles across. And big buildings with building blocks that weigh 50 tons down in Peru and Ecuador. And cities that are built on cliffs and on top of mountains, you know. And those are just, you know, one here and one there and one. It makes you think, well, my God, were there people out here in ancient times smarter than we are today, more technologically advanced? Did they have ships that could go across the oceans? Before the flood, flying in jet airplanes, they had medicine equal to today, art, clothing, and mechanical devices that have been dug up, but they don't fit the theory of evolution. See, evolution is a fairy tale for adults that tells us once upon a time, long, long ago and far, far away. And then they proceed to tell us the story about how billions and billions of years ago, thus and such occurred. Pure fantasy. There isn't a shred of evidence, not a shred of proof. No scientific tests can be duplicated. And, you know, if people want to believe that, that's fine. There's no problem with that. People believe in religion. I kind of watch people, you know, religious people. They scare the hell out of me, and I watch them as far away as I can get from them. And then they believe in superstition. And rational people who attach themselves to science, they attach themselves to another superstition called evolution. And I call that science. I look at both of them and I say, oh my God, I got one superstitious bunch on the one hand, and I look over here and I got another superstitious bunch on the other hand. And neither side can ever come to an actual grasp of truth and understanding, you know, how did it actually happen? So in order for us to do that, if we're going to arrive at the truth, we got to actually come to grips with 14-foot skeletons and buildings that are so big and so massive that we can't duplicate them today, and ask the question, well, how did those people build that? Who was here to do that? We look at Stonehenge, you know, in amazement to this day, and say, how in the world did those people get 30-ton blocks of rock sitting up there on top of that? That would be a whale of a feat. It can be duplicated. We could do Stonehenge. But hey, boys and girls, there's a lot of buildings around the world that we can't duplicate today. There's a block of rock in a wall down in Ecuador that weighs 200,000 tons. It's a dressed rock. It's a square. You know, I say square, it's rectangular, but it's, you know, it's got corners to it. It's got 8 corners. And these corners, you know, are exact. It didn't just evolve this way. You know, if you're out here walking around, you know, and you see a block of rock over here, and this thing is square, and you measure it up, and it's got the same measurements all around it, you know, you can be pretty sure that some intelligence over here squared that thing up. Here's the crazy part of it. Do you know how much 200,000 tons is? And that's a lot of weight. That's a big chunk. Let me describe it. The Titanic, you know that big ship, the Titanic, and the Queen Mary, you know, these big merchant ships. Well, those big luxury liners weigh about 40,000 tons. 40,000 tons. All right, now let's pull the Queen Mary into a shipyard, and let's just stick it under a couple of cranes, and let's just pick it up and set it on the ground. Do you think that there's any place in the world that there's a crane big enough to pick up a ship like the Queen Mary? Well, I'm here to tell you that there isn't. So when they want to work on a ship that big, what they have to do is run it into what they call a dry dock. And that's a big hole in the ground that they can flood with water. They can float the thing in, and then they let the water out of it, and the thing settles down on the bottom, and then they can go in there and then go to work on it. So when we want to work on a ship, we have to put it in a dry dock. You can't pick it up. Now, there are places that have cranes that pick up fishing boats and just pick them up out of the water and stick them over here on the ground, and then they work on them, and then they pick them up off the ground, and they set them back in the water. Fishing boats and things like that. Now, let's go down here. I told you there's a rock here that's now 200,000 tons. There's lots of rocks that are 50,000 tons. That's as big as or bigger than the Queen Mary. There's lots of rocks that weigh 200 tons. You know, they go anywhere from 3, 6, 16, 30, 50 tons, things like that. And these rocks are set into walls, and they're dressed. Now, some of them are square. Some of them are odd shapes, and then the odd shape fits with the next rock, and it's cut in an odd shape to fit. Kind of like looking at a puzzle. You know the odd shapes that go into a jigsaw puzzle? And remember that the tab has to fit into a corresponding hole. And then when you're doing a jigsaw puzzle, you know, if you'll think about it, yeah, it's true, you got a tab and you got a hole, but they don't fit together perfectly. So if they don't fit together perfectly, well, then obviously it doesn't go there. All right, well, these rocks are built like a jigsaw puzzle. They're so close together you can't stick a knife blade between them. So they were cut. There isn't any technology today that can cut rock irregularly and then put them together. None. Doesn't exist. And yet there they are. Now, those people that did that were smarter than we are today. They had a greater technology than we have today. And the Bible talks about that, and the Bible talks about space flight. The Bible talks about flight. And yet your preacher doesn't talk about that because if he did, he wouldn't last long as your preacher. Because he subscribes to evolutionary philosophy, and he doesn't tell you everything that's in the Bible. And unless you read it for yourself, you wouldn't know that. And most religious people don't read the Bible. They haven't got a clue. So atheists and agnostics and evolutionists, they don't read the Bible because they don't want to. The religious guys, they don't read the Bible because I'm not sure that they're capable. I mean, everybody's got one, but they don't read it. And if they read it, they don't believe what it says. I mean, time and time again, you know, you take a look at people's actions, you know, in life. People don't practice Exodus chapter 12. Jesus asked the question. He said, well, why do you people call me Lord, Lord, and do not the things which I say? That's because they've got a different God. They've got a different religion. They've got a different program over here that they follow. They don't follow the Scripture. Well, anyway, Jonathan Gray over here writes a book called Dead Men's Secrets. And I want to tell you a little story here, pertinently. William Prescott, the great archaeologist, reminds us that a nation may pass away and leave only the memory of its existence, but the stories of science that it has gathered up will endure forever. You see, folklore is a fossil of history. It preserves history in the guise of colorful tales. Far from being a collection of fables, it is a recital of actual past events, even though from generation to generation some facts have become distorted or forgotten. Professor I.A. Efremov of the Soviet Union cautions that historians must pay more respect to ancient traditions and folklore, and he accuses Western science of snobbishness in rejecting the tales of the common people. We must face it, legends are usually based on hardcore fact. Take the legend of Troy, for instance. No scholar ever took the Iliad or the Odyssey of Homer as history. But Schliemann, putting faith in it, discovered the mythical city of Troy. The Iliad spoke of a cup decorated with doves, which Odysseus used. In a shaft, Schliemann found the 3,600-year-old cup. Herodias told a fabulous story of a distant country where griffins guarded a golden treasure. This land Altai, or Kim Shan, has now been found, together with ancient gold mines and decorations from a high culture, prominently display the griffin. This vague myth is now seen to be a fact. Mexican Indian legends spoke of a sacred well of sacrifice into which maidens and jewelry were hurled. Historians dismiss this as a mere tale, until the well at Chichen Itza was discovered in the 19th century. Now, more than any document, the Bible has been assailed as a collection of fanciful myths. And yet, to the embarrassment of its critics, archaeological discoveries have proved time and time again that the fabled cities, mythical persons, and impossible events were not only true, but they were in fact reliable historical reporting in every detail. And indeed, the Bible can now be regarded as the most accurate and the most trustworthy source of history that we possess.